first? Yep. I'll introduce you.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you so much, Sean, for that powerful presentation. That was really brilliant. And friend, our next speaker is Chris Polster, and he's going to be talking on the topic the most important thing you need to know in order to be successful at anything. Put your hands together for Chris as he take the stage.
Thank you, Oliver. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon. I would like to talk to you a little bit about how you can be successful at anything. Give you the number one consideration. I'm going to begin my talk by telling you a story. In 1999, I was driving with my wife, pick up her car in Bloomington, Minnesota. We're pulling off the freeway, taking a right-hand turn, going across the bridge, across 494. And we pull into the dealership. And as we're pulling into the dealership, we hear on the radio, we're conversing with each other. The radio's in the background. But the words that I'm going to tell you I heard resonated with us, it distracted us from what we were talking about. Minnesota man dies drowning in Turtle Lake in Wisconsin. And of course that piqued our interest, in Minnesota man in Wisconsin. I'm not going to use his real name here, but Bill Robinson drowned Turtle Lake, Wisconsin. And of course, we knew Bill Robinson. Bill Robinson was a good friend of the family. His kids and our kids played together. His wife and my wife were best friends at work. It was a moment, an unforgettable moment. But that's all we heard on the radio. So the rest is a mystery at that moment in time. It's all a mystery to us, what's happened. Of course, we want to know. Right away, we want to call his wife, say what happened, but of course we know that's not the right thing to do at this moment in time. But time goes on, and we learned at the funeral 3 days later that he had drowned when his inner tube that he was floating in out in the middle of the lake flipped over and went away from him. And Scott did not know how to swim. I knew he didn't know how to swim. We all knew he didn't know how to swim. So it's, of course, very disturbing. And as time goes on, we learn more about what's happening. The services are over, and we've all been to services, you know what they're like. And the mood a little bit lightens after that. But of course, it's a very difficult time. So the story doesn't end there, however, because what I'm going to tell you next, it occurred to me, and I have lived with this for my whole life since that time. It was about 10 years earlier at a party that we were all at. The children were all very young at that point in time, and we were together enjoying our time at this little gathering. And it came to light that Scott did not know how to swim. And I said, Scott, you don't know how to swim. I can teach you to swim in 5 minutes. So we go over to the lake. Lake Nokomis was close by. We go over to the lake, either now or sometime soon. It was still early in the evening. I can teach you how to swim in 5 minutes. Of course, Bill laughed that off. We didn't do that. We didn't ever do that. And of course, all it was forgotten for years and years, because it was about 10 years later when that fateful announcement came on the radio. And now when I tell this story, oftentimes people think, okay, well, this story is about me and how I must have felt when I talked to Bill about learning how to swim and how important that would be to him to know how to swim. Because he was still a young man. He was only 40 years old. He was children. still very young. And it haunted me for quite a while. But again, the story isn't about me. The story is about what I learned from Bill. This story is about Bill. His life is over. Why is his life over? Because he wasn't prepared to be in the lake in an inner tube without knowing how to swim. He could have been. I offered Bill an opportunity to be prepared because I actually knew that they took these kinds of vacations. I tell this story because it made me think about my whole life, about this issue of being prepared and how any one of our inner tubes can flip at any time, metaphorically speaking. Well, right now in our country, we are experiencing very difficult times. That's not an announcement. That's just something we're all living with. We know that. It's a chaotic time. It's a mysterious time. We've got all these new technologies coming in. We've got all these workplace shifts coming in. And I guess my question to you today is, are you prepared for the future? And what might happen in the future? Prepared? I know you've all been preparing for life with your education, your activities. You've been preparing for all these things. As life happens to you, you've been prepared because you played as children and that transferred into life experiences. Maybe you played Little League. Things you learned in Little League, you could transfer to what you learned as an adult and how you relate to people as an adult. We're always learning things. But are you intentionally preparing yourselves, for the future, or are you just thinking about tomorrow? See, most Americans are preparing for tomorrow without thinking about 10 years from now. And it's one of the reasons it's so chaotic now, is because we're preparing for the problems we have now. And the reality is the problems are going to get worse if we don't make them better. It's always going to get worse if we can't make them better. So are we preparing? Are we preparing together for the future? Because none of us can enter the future alone and expect to succeed. None of us can succeed alone. We need each other for that. Which means we need to be prepared, to relate to each other effectively. That means we need to communicate with each other. We need to give each other information. We need to listen to each other. That's how you prepare for the future, okay? By being aware of what's happening in the world, in your community. What's happening in your community? What can you do something about? What do you have no control over? Is your inner tube secure in the lake? You riding in that inner tube? You know how to swim if it flips? I'll ask you that question, and I'll ask you to take that home with you. Secure in your inner tube, prepared if it flips. Thanks for this opportunity to talk to you this afternoon.
Good job. Sure.